The storm came down off the high passes like a vengeful thing, wild, unforgiving, and full of rage. Bitter winds slashed across the open range, tearing at the dry grasses and bending the trees. The sky turned a gunmetal gray, as if the heavens themselves were closing in. The mountains, once proud and towering, disappeared behind a veil of sleet so thick it felt like the whole world had been swallowed by a storm. The thunder cracked like a whip, sending tremors through the ground, while the rain turned the dirt trail into slick, unforgiving mud. In the midst of this fury rode Jedediah, a man with the weight of the world on his shoulders. His collar pulled high, his hat brim low against the howling wind, he rode with his Mustang muscling against the storm. He wasn't headed anywhere in particular, just away, as he always did. You see, Jedediah wasn't a man who liked towns. People there, they talked too much, and Jedediah had learned that the less people said to him, the better. Quiet had become his only kind of peace. His past was a fire, one that had taken everything he held dear. His home, his loved ones, all reduced to ash. Since that fire, he'd been a drifter, chasing nothing but the silence of wide-open spaces. But then, through the curtain of rain, something caught his eye. A figure, still, unmoving, crouched by a twisted cottonwood tree. His heart skipped a beat as he squinted against the downpour, realizing it was a woman. He cursed under his breath, kicked his horse into a trot, and slid off into the muck. His boots sank deep into the mud as he made his way to her, the wind howling around him. And there she was, half sitting, half slumped against the tree, soaked to the bone. Her dress was torn, her hands raw and trembling, the cold of the storm seeping deep into her bones. She looked lost, broken, like she'd stepped out of life itself and couldn't find her way back. "Ma'am," he said gently, crouching beside her, "you all right?" She blinked slowly, eyes a pale blue like the mountain forget-me-nots, but her gaze seemed distant, vacant. She didn't speak at first, and when she did, her voice was barely more than a whisper, carried away by the wind. "Horse ran off, couldn't find the trail." Her words were fragile, like something worn thin from use. She winced as she tried to speak more but couldn't find the strength. She was weak, wounded, cold, and alone. Jedediah didn't need more. Without a second thought, he wrapped his coat around her shoulders and gently helped her up, guiding her onto the back of his horse. She winced in pain as she climbed, but she made no complaint. He didn't ask her name. She didn't ask his. There was something sacred about the silence between them, a mutual understanding that didn't need words. They rode west, the storm still raging, toward a place Jedediah knew, a cabin he'd found long ago, tucked away in the scrublands, a place where the wind didn't howl so fiercely, where he'd stashed supplies for a time just like this. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was a shared respect, a quiet acknowledgement that sometimes the most profound connection happens without a word being spoken.
They arrived at the cabin, and Jedediah helped her down from the horse. Her eyes caught his once more, still hollow, still distant, but a flicker of something there. He didn't ask her to explain. Instead, he built a fire, the crackling flames casting long shadows on the walls, filling the room with warmth. She sat near the fire, still shivering. She hadn't spoken, not really, but Jedediah didn't press her. The silence between them was a comfort. He respected it, and for the first time in what seemed like forever, he wasn't alone. He could feel the weight of her presence, like two solitary souls who had stumbled upon each other, perhaps by fate, perhaps by necessity. As the night wore on, she began to speak, slowly, carefully. Her name was Clara. She had lived on a small farm once, a place she had loved, a place that had once been home. But then, a man had come through, a man who took everything from her. He stole what he wanted, destroyed what he couldn't. And Clara, in her desperation, had fought. She'd fought for everything, but in the end, she had to run. "I couldn't stay," she whispered, her voice thick with a mixture of sorrow and defiance. "It wasn't just the farm, it was him." Jedediah didn't need to hear more. He could feel the pain in her words, the scars she carried deep inside. They were the same scars he carried. Both of them had lost everything to fire, his in a blaze of smoke and flame, hers in the cold, brutal hands of a man. In that moment, something shifted between them, something unspoken, but understood. They had both been through hell, but now, in this quiet place, they were finding something else, the chance to heal. Days passed in the cabin, and the two of them worked side by side. They hunted together, mended the roof, and kept the fire burning. Each day they shared tasks, never asking more of each other than what was needed to survive. And in that silent rhythm, something began to grow. A quiet understanding, a connection forged in hardship. Clara brought back a small sparrow, its wing broken, its body trembling. She cradled it in her hands with a tenderness that struck Jedediah. He watched her as she nursed the bird back to health, feeding it crumbs and watching it with a fierce kind of care. The sparrow, in many ways, was a symbol for Clara. Fragile, broken, but with a desire to fly again. He could see it in the way she tended to the bird, as if she were tending to a piece of her own soul that had been shattered and was now slowly being mended. One night, Clara fell ill. A fever took hold of her, and she burned with a heat that sent her into restless sleep. Jedediah stayed by her side, wiping her brow, speaking softly to her when her delirium made her mutter strange things. When the fever finally broke, and Clara woke, weak but alive, she gave him the first real smile he had seen since they met. It wasn't much, but it was everything. And for the first time in a long time, Jedediah felt something he hadn't known he was missing. It wasn't love, at least not yet, but it was something more fundamental. It was the sense that, maybe, they weren't so alone in the world after all. But there was still something Clara needed to do. The farm, the life she had lost, it all lingered in her mind. And so, one morning, she decided to go back, to see what was left of her old life. "I need to face it," she said quietly, packing her things without looking at him. "I can't rebuild until I do." Jedediah didn't ask any questions. He didn't need to. He simply nodded, grabbed his saddlebag, and said, "I'll ride with you." And so they left, traveling east toward the remains of Clara's farm. When they arrived, all that was left were charred beams and ash, the bones of a home now lost to time and fire. Clara stood there, unmoving, as she ran her hands over the remnants of the place where her life had once been. And then, in a voice that was steady but full of weight, Clara confessed something that shocked Jedediah. "I tracked him down," she said, her eyes never leaving the ruins. "I found him, and I buried him." Jedediah didn't flinch. He understood. In this world, sometimes you fought not to win, but to survive. "I did what I had to," she added, her voice quieter now, more resolute. "And now, I rebuild, piece by piece." And rebuild they did. Together they worked, building fences, planting crops, mending what had been broken. As the days passed, they shared more than just work. They shared lessons. He taught her how to hunt, how to read the weather and the way the clouds shifted. She taught him how to plant seeds, how to mend clothes, how to find beauty in the smallest things. Their lives, once full of silence, now had a rhythm, a quiet, steady rhythm. And in that rhythm, a bond formed, not through grand gestures, but through the simple act of being there for each other. There were small moments, like when their fingers brushed as they worked, or when they sat by the fire, sharing a quiet look that said more than words ever could. And one night, when the air was crisp and the stars above were like pinpricks in the black velvet sky, they danced. Not for anyone else, but just for the moment, for the life they had built, for the peace they had found together.
Seasons changed, as they always do. Spring turned to summer, and summer to fall. The farm began to thrive once again. Crops grew, the animals returned, and the house stood tall against the wind. Clara, no longer the woman who had been left in the storm, was now someone different, someone stronger, someone who had rebuilt not just her farm, but herself. Jade, Jedediah, had found what he was looking for too. It wasn't a place, and it wasn't a promise. It was the quiet understanding that sometimes just being there for someone was enough. In the end, the story wasn't about love at first sight. It wasn't about sweeping gestures or grand declarations. It was about two people, broken by the world, who found each other in the silence. And together, they built something new, something worth staying for. As winter came again, with its quiet snowfalls and stillness, Jedediah was still there, still watching her as she worked, still finding her in the quiet mornings. And that, in the end, was enough.